Good morning again. I just realized that I haven't been having a lecture here at the university for over 2 years now. And the first time I'm doing this, I had to do it in a conference. So I will talk to you here today from different perspectives or different roles. I will talk to you as a teacher educator, and as a researcher. I'm a researcher in the field of education, of course. But I will start with saying something about my background. I think it will help you to understand my position. I have followed two paths during my working life. One is education and the other is art. And I have had the good fortune to be able to combine these paths. So I started off as a preschool teacher, and I would say that my 12 years in preschool have formed my pedagogical credo. That is to employ a holistic pedagogical approach, which means that teaching and learning is based on all aspects of the child or the pupil, the learner. And the intention is to develop each child's emotional, social, physical, artistic, creative, as well as intellectual potentials. So I'm educated as an artist. So being both an artist and a preschool teacher meant to look at the world from a specific angle, I would say. And the holistic view is here central. What we have in common is that we want to explore, we want to investigate, to look at things from different angles, and we like to include different perspectives, a range of modalities, a range of expressions. And I think you might see where I'm going now, because storyline offers all this. Eventually, I went back to the university to become a teacher in visual art and Swedish in upper secondary school. And I had the opportunity to develop my pedagogical credo even more. And then I became a teacher educator. Today, I will highlight a holistic teaching and learning aspect in education for sustainable development and in storyline work for futures literacy. We are facing difficult times. Global warming, climate change, burning forests, pandemics, war, and an ongoing flow of refugees from different parts of the world. Human impact on the ecosystems of the planet has created a risk not only to human beings but to all beings. Clearly, we cannot continue to carry on like this. And given these severe circumstances, we face a paradigm shift that we have not seen in recent times. The feeling that we are racing downhill in an unstoppable acceleration and that we are actually facing an imminent danger is devastating for all of us. In the middle of this crisis, we have our children, the future generation. This is most likely very distressing for children and young people. How can we then, as educators, as teachers, as schools, handle this situation? Because we have to deal with these issues. We are all connected to children in one way or another, in our personal life and in our professional lives as teachers. And I am fortunate to have a grandchild. This is Ellie, who I love very much. And we have so much in common. She likes books, she likes to read, to paint, she likes to sing, she likes to dance. She also likes to be outdoor. She likes to create things with sand, with leaves, trees, branches, stones. She loves to feed the birds and hug the trees. Thinking of her in this world breaks my heart. But because of her, I'm also eager to feel hope for the future. I'm sure you all do the same. We want a safe world for our children, and we want our children and young people to have faith in their abilities to meet a new future. During my research in school, 5 years ago, when I observed and participated in a storyline activity, I realized that even very young children of 8 years old, they have the capability to care for nature. And these groups of children, they were creating a frieze, which was a large painting of their nearby forest. And I think you have seen the image of this frieze. While painting, they were talking about their experiences of being in the forest the day before. And they told me that they had found litter in the forest. All the children had picked a tree to become friends with, and one boy was quite upset. And he told me that there were broken glass and sharp pieces of metal intertwined with the roots of his tree. I was very angry, the boy told me. How can people leave their litter in the forest? Don't they realize that the forest is home for trees and for animals? How would you feel if someone destroyed your home? He asked. The teacher, who in fact was a student teacher, reminded the boy of what the children had made in the forest the day before, and the boy told me that they come up with slogans. And the children started to say, "Save the animals, save the nature, save the planet." "We should talk to the authorities," one of the pupils said. "Yes, we should save the animals, give them a better home and not cut down all the trees, because that is bad." And I was quite moved by the seriousness of the situation and the atmosphere amongst these 8-year-old children. And they had several suggestions. We can call the media. We can send videos over the state of the forest. Or we can demonstrate. After some discussion, they decided on having a demonstration. Their goal was to make grown-ups understand that we have to care for nature, and in particular to protect their forest. So they started to prepare the placards, as you can see on the images here. They drew pictures and they wrote slogans, and they attached their placards to branches they had picked from the forest, and they started marching around the classroom, chanting and protesting. And during this activity, the student teacher said that it became clear to him that the next activity had to be a demonstration in the real world. This was far too genuine to not bring out in the world outside the school. So they did. They walked to the forest first to show the trees that we are with you. And then they walked through the community and to the local library where they could show all the work they had done during the storyline. Last spring, when I conducted an action research within the Erasmus project, with many of the teachers sitting here, right in front of me now, I interviewed the children after a 6-week-long storyline, in which they had built a new city on a desert island, as you can see here. One girl told me, "When we come to school this morning, we discovered an oil tanker that had crashed outside our island. We discussed in groups. We talked about how to get rid of the oil, and all came up with very good ideas, like how to kind of suck up the oil or gather it so it wouldn't spread, things like that. I think we have solved the problem soon." So this girl was full of hope that she and her friends were capable of dealing with difficult problems. Yet another schoolgirl who reacted on humans' impact on the environment is Greta Thunberg. Her interest in environmental issues began at school. It happened when she was shown to a documentary about pollutions of the sea. Her response to the worries, her concerns and hopelessness she felt was to act. And she did that by putting pressure on politicians. Greta Thunberg is a young environmental activist, if you don't know her, from Sweden. And she has created headlines around the globe over the last years for challenging the world leaders on their shortcomings regarding climate change actions. She started a protest by sitting outside the Swedish parliament with a simple placard stating, "School strike for the climate." And this inspired young people all over the world to do the same, which initiated an international movement called Fridays for Future. And I just want to say that the children you saw before, they did that before Greta Thunberg, just for the record. So to all of us who work in the fields of education, it is both interesting but also necessary to understand how young people might become engaged and passionate about sustainability issues, and to find ways to encourage pupils to take a stand and to make their voices heard. One aspect is to consider how teacher could or should act when young pupils want to use their democratic human rights to speak and to demonstrate like the children did. I think Thunberg may serve as an example of how education can be a starting point for engagement, for life-changing decisions according to sustainability. Education can be the facilitator of students' agency. In this Erasmus Plus project, we are exploring in different ways how to work with dilemmas regarding the environment, children's fears, and sustainability, both in our participating schools, in Slovenia, in Sweden, and in Finland, and at the project's participating universities here in Gothenburg and in Norway and in Finland. This cooperation between school and university is a way to link theory and practice, and we think it's eventually time to let practice inform theory and to use theoretical knowledge when implementing sustainability issues in school. By researching what's happening in classes, we also want to add knowledge to the research community. So that is to view theory and practice as dimensions of teaching and learning activities, not as two different activities. So when we talk about education for sustainable development, we need to implement a holistic approach to education. This means to include all senses, to embrace complexity of all life and ecological systems, to see the entanglements of different sustainability angles, and to recognize human nature intertwinements and that the world in fact is intersubjective. As you know, Storyline is such an approach. I met Storyline about 15 years ago when I attended a course in Stockholm for 2 days. The theme was related to normativity and to basic values and to questions related to attitudes and equality. And as in very many storylines, we created families, and my character, as you can see here, was the father in this family. And I felt that I could use my previous pedagogical knowledge and my subjects of visual art and Swedish, since much of the things that we did during those days was related or based on communication. Also, I realized that this specific content that we were working with, this storyline was called Just Being Ordinary. And here are the content. And I realized that this content was an example of social sustainability, and that sustainability doesn't have to be only concerned with environmental issues. And I saw Storyline as a potential, and relevant methodology to work with sustainability's all 3 pillars. So the 3 pillars of sustainability are social, environmental, and economic. And given that education about, for, and through sustainability needs to be based on a holistic approach, Storyline can be an appropriate and fruitful way, which our Erasmus Plus project now also can confirm. So education for sustainable development can benefit much from the Storyline approach because it is based on democratic aspects. It enhances pupils' sense of agency. It puts emphasis on respect for pupils' knowledge and work. It includes real engagement, both from teachers and from pupils. It highlights the importance of variation and different learning environments, not only stay in the classroom. This can be underpinned by relational pedagogy, which in different ways means care for the pupil. And it is also very challenging. So when we work with Storyline, we want to support the pupils to know something, which of course all teaching methods aim at. We also want them to feel something, which not all education methods does. We want them to be able to do things which they can try during the storyline. We want them to feel willingness or a desire to act, just like the children did, as I showed you before. We want them to dare. The storyline has such aims, and so should education for sustainable development. I think it's important to talk about what learning entails. So in our project at Backatorpsskolan, we used Knut Iller's explanation, and he's saying that learning is any process that in living organisms leads to permanent capacity change, and which is not solely due to biological maturation or aging. Iller's claims that all learning involves two very different processes. It's one external interaction process between the learner and his or her social, cultural, or material environment. And then there is the internal psychological process. In addition, he describes 3 dimensions of learning. And these are, as you can see in this figure, it is content, incentive, and interaction. So the content dimension concerns what is learned. This is usually described as knowledge, skills, but it can also mean other things like opinions, insights, attitudes, values, ways of behavior. That is also content that we can work with. And when we work with storyline, the content is cross-curricular and multimodal. The incentive dimension provides the mental energy that is necessary for the learning process to occur at all. So it contains feelings, emotions, motivation, and desires. And this is also important for balancing the learner. So in storyline, we try to motivate the learners in various ways and to keep the motivation. And we have the inclusion aim with that. And these 2 dimensions are relying on each other. You cannot just work with the content if you don't are able to make it interesting or to motivate the student. The interaction dimension then take place as experience, activities, participation, etc. And this builds up the sociality of the learner. And in storyline, the learners work in pairs, as you know, or in small groups, in medium-sized groups, half class, whole class, and so on. And it is important to consider all these 3 dimensions of learning. We cannot only focus at one at the time. So you have to know yourself as a teacher. Where am I in this? Am I balancing my lectures or my education for the learners? Or am I just focusing on the content? Or am I very interested in the motivation things or the interaction? Then you have to look at this model and find a way to balance all 3 dimensions. When we talk about learning in school, we often talk about assimilative learning and accommodative learning. Hard words for me to say in English and in Swedish. Assimilation is, in short, when you use pre-existing knowledge to make sense of new knowledge, while accommodation means that pre-existing knowledge has to change in order to fit in new knowledge. I think you recognize these terms, and I will not go further into them now because I want to say something about transformative learning. Because when we talk about education for sustainable development, we often now talk about transformative learning. And what is that? This learning implies what could be termed as personality change. It is a change that will affect you in your life. It is the result of a crisis-like situation caused by challenges experienced as urgent and unavoidable. So this is not an easy kind of learning. This is hard. This is also probably what humanity as a whole is facing right now. Look at the pandemic, the climate change, refugee flows, and so on. So transformative learning occurs only in very special situations of profound significance for the learner. Do we want that? People tend to avoid transformative learning because you have to change your thinking, your acting, your lifestyle. Are we prepared to do that? And are we prepared as teachers to force this transformative learning on our children? Or shall we just continue the assimilative or accommodative learning? So when we talk about transformative learning in schools, what can we do with the younger children? Because transformation implies a different way of doing things. We want to work towards pupils' agency. We want to elicit social change, new ways of being. How can we do that? And I think we all have done this the past 2 years. We haven't lived on like we did before. That was a major change for many of us, not the least when we had to stay at home and teach during Zoom. And as an art teacher, it was really challenging to do that. We also need to think that we need new ways of how we do learning. And we want authentic learning contexts. Are you having... Can you check the time, please?
We have
Good. So I will give you one example from the storyline 3 mutants that I was involved in 5 or 6 years ago. So this was an action research too, in 2 school classes, grade 2 and 6. And you saw some of the children before when they were demonstrating. This is the same storyline. It lasted for 6 weeks, as I said, and the aim was to create personal relationships with plants, and in specific with trees. And the teachers, they wanted to prevent plant blindness and to promote ecological literacy. And the children were becoming trees over this period of time. And therefore, this was a kind of transformation process. That is not the same as transformative learning, but they did a transformation. So as I have interpreted this storyline work, it was a way to deal with the time we live in called the Anthropocene. It was a way to go beyond humanism, from cultural, sociological viewpoints to a post-humanist perspective, in order to enable the pupils as agents and to shed light on non-human agents. So the storyline work was a way to let the pupils be with non-humans, the trees, and to engage with the green side of the world, and vice versa. So this meant for the children a movement from a then to a now, and that implies a change. And one pupil said, "I notice trees much more now, and I think of trees quite a lot. Now I care somehow about trees." Another said, "I have learned stuff about trees, like the importance of water and nutrition, and I have begun to think that trees actually have their own lives." And a third pupil said, "I know a tree now. I have worked together with it. I have observed it. I've been with it. I and my friend, we had our trees in the forest next to each other, so they were also friends. And the trees became our friends too." Another said, "I have sort of been taking care of a tree, and so I have had to learn about trees a lot. Now I actually think that trees should be treated like a real person. You know, the forest is like their home, and we just barge in and damage and ruin their environment. It would not be nice if someone came to our house and destroyed it. So I am much more careful now." And this happened because of a change in knowledge and in awareness. I think these quotations are in line with transformative learning at a child level. This shows a deeper appreciation for trees and nature and the forest and the environment. A change in attitude. From the beginning, they didn't think that trees were living organisms. And at the end of the storyline, all the pupils knew that they were living. The process of transformative learning include affect, intuition, and imagination. And that is why storyline is such an amazing approach to include, to evoke children's feelings. The students' attitude after this storyline demonstrates transformation from not noticing plants at all in the environment or as living organisms to regard plants as friends and as individuals that live their own lives. That's quite a change in thinking. They identify themselves with trees and they compare trees' life forms with their own. And this change in attitude is an important first step for action and for social change. How am I doing, Ylva, in time? Good. So the transforming learning opportunities that I could see during this storyline was based on 3 aspects of transformative learning. It was opportunities for critical thinking, which were facilitated mainly through key questions. The pupils had opportunities to share the transformative process with each other. They had opportunity to act in accordance with their new knowledge and perspectives. And according to Meserom, who talks about transformative learning, self-reflection is crucial in this process. The students were given several possibilities to discuss, to reflect, and to reflect on the state of the forest they had visited and the life of trees. And I think all of you who have worked with storyline can recognize this. The children are given a lot of opportunities during this teaching method. We could see that pupils' preconceptions about trees were challenging. And this means that the teacher used what I call an inverted anthropomorphization, which meant that the pupils became trees instead of giving trees human characteristica. I think it was quite unusual to letting the children become trees instead of a family or a person. I'll just say a few words about the role of the teacher here, because it was really important. You have to think of, when you work in a storyline, that you as a teacher are always a role model. What you do as a teacher will help the students to do the same. So if you want them to be in character or use their characters, you have to do that yourself. You cannot just step back and expect that your children will be fine with being a tree or being another person. You have to do that yourself. And this, you can see the teacher, she came one morning with a neck painted as a birch, and she said, "Oh, I'm so thirsty today. I really need to drink a lot of water. When spring is coming and the sun is hot, I feel so thirsty." And she was reaching out for getting the sunlight, and she did different things. One morning she had this thing on her head, said, "Look at me now." And what happened was that the children, they took after her. She asked them, "How do you feel? Have you felt anything yet?" And they started to say, "Yes, I couldn't get dressed this morning because I had a big branch sticking out my clothes," and things like that. "And I couldn't jump today because I was so stiff, like a tree." So it really helped the children that the teacher were becoming a tree. And when I interviewed them after, later on, they all confirmed this. It was important that the teacher played a role, because then we did it. And one boy, one morning when I was there, I looked at him and I thought, what is changed here? And he had painted his hair all green. So it was quite fun. Also, you need to be flexible, and that was what happened when the children wanted to demonstrate, because that was not something that the teacher had planned for. So you have to be flexible and see, where are they going now? They are actually doing something really good. I put my plan aside and go with the children's flow. So that is to grasp the good ideas of the pupils. And the student teacher, he didn't know, am I supposed to follow this when they want to demonstrate? Yes, I think so, I said. And they did. Say a few words about the result and conclusions, but we will also talk tomorrow. Ann-Katrin, where are you? with Ann-Katrin from Finland, Åbo Academy, and Virginia Lockhart Peterson. We will talk about the conclusions we have made so far tomorrow. So I will just say a few words here, because I want to show you a photo story that the children made. So facilitating a storyline takes time. You all know that. We also have seen that balancing storyline features is difficult. So you have to look at yourself. What am I doing? Am I using the characters? Or am I just working with key questions? Or are we just doing a lot of things? Are we focusing on the activities? Because you need to balance the storyline features. And I have seen that the characters can be used much more and for various reasons. Sometimes it can be a character who starts an activity. So you can use different characters as a teacher. You can go in and out in different characters as a teacher. We often do that at the teacher education here in Gothenburg. We are angry parents and we are utbildningsminister. What's that in English? The Minister of Education, and we are all different kind of persons when we're conducting a storyline here at the education. We also seen that democratic capabilities are in fact enhanced during this work. And we have also seen that we need to talk about the aims. And one of the teachers sitting here somewhere, she's so good at this. In the end of each section, she always asks the pupils, what have you trained today? She doesn't ask, what have you learned? It's so much easier for the pupil to explain what they have been doing. And then she talked about, yes, that's you. Yes, that is a kind of knowledge. This is learning. She pinpointed that. So that I have learned from her. And of course, teachers play a crucial role for the pupils, not only by being in character, but all what they are doing. They are listening, and the other teacher sitting here, she had the most amazing tålamod, patience when she listened, because they came up with such stories, the children, and they were trying to find new ways to get a boat going, and they were really, really funny, and she listened with seriousness, and I had to, like this, and giggle a bit, because it was so crazy, but she listened very carefully to each student. And also, we see that teachers learn from the pupils. Time's up. I won't say anything about futures literacy, but it is important. And by this I say, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Margaretha, for that presentation.